What is going on, IF Warriors? So, a new study has found that intermittent fasting increases the risk for type 2 diabetes. I know what you're thinking. Can't do that. It's no way. Because the whole point of intermittent fasting is to help with type 2 diabetes. In fact, people have used intermittent fasting in case studies to help reverse the symptoms of type 2 diabetes. So this can't be right. But unfortunately, there's a study that just came out that yes, type 2 diabetes is increased with intermittent fasting. And not only that, there are articles like the Daily Mail saying the jig is up. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. So we have the Daily Mail here saying, is the jig up for intermittent fasting? Skipping breakfast may raise risk of diabetes. Global study suggests. A new study suggested that eating breakfast after 9 a.m. increased diabetes risk. Eating dinner after 10 p.m. was also associated with a higher likelihood. Read more. And then I guess they talk about the other study that we've already debunked in terms of it being no better than a simple caloric restriction when compared to the actual numbers of fat loss and body composition. Intermittent fasting wins out every single time. But let's entertain this study. I don't really care what they have to say. Whenever I see an article like this, right, because I'm always researching studies, I just simply go to the study. And so this is a study here. This study released it was published in June of 2023, so this year, June 16, by Anna Palomar Kroos and colleagues. And it looked at the association of mealtime and number of eating occasions and nighttime fasting duration with incidence of type 2 diabetes in the Nutritionist Santé cohort. So it's a cohort study because it's looking at a large group of people. It is not a randomized controlled trial. And that's important because sure, you could extrapolate some information from a cohort that involves over 103,000 people, right? But you don't know exactly what is driving those people that do one thing over the other, because they're not sitting there doing intermittent fasting. They're not saying, oh, I'm going to do some intermittent fasting. And that's the reason why you're getting this data up there from 2009 to 2021. That's not what's happening. Correlation does not mean causation. I'm going to say this again. Correlation does not mean causation. All this shows is that the data indicates that those who eat after 9 o'clock, like how early is that? If you eat before 8 o'clock, you're fine. Or yes, if you eat before 8 o'clock, you're fine. But if you eat before 9 o'clock, that's when there's an exponential growth in possibility of type 2 diabetes. But you have to take into account the lifestyle. Those who have the luxury of consistently eating before 8 o'clock tend to be those who are more financially stable, tend to be those who have more resources to be able to eat earlier, than eat in the afternoon, than eat dinner, because they don't have as many things to worry about. Most people that, for example, that are living from paycheck to paycheck or are doing 9 to 5s, they normally don't eat in the morning because they're rushing to work. They normally don't have this. So you have a person who has a propensity to eat earlier than 8 o'clock in the morning on a consistent level normally has more resources. Now, there are people that have less resources that eat earlier than 8 o'clock, but that's not directly tied to them eating earlier. That's simply because they just do it. right? It's not, their lifestyle doesn't dictate that. They just do that themselves. But if we looked at a bunch of people versus a bunch of other people, the likelihood that those who are eating later are those who are working, are those who are working 9 to 5s, are those who are working paycheck to paycheck, versus those who have more of a luxury to be able to eat earlier, who have personal chefs, who have these different things that are set up for them to just be able to eat earlier. They also tend to eat better. Those who have less resources and less finances, they tend to eat worse. They tend to eat foods that are not that good for you, foods that can be high in fructose, high in glucose, which can increase the possibility of type 2 diabetes. On top of that, just because they're eating right after 9 o'clock does not mean that they're doing intermittent fasting. They can be eating all day after 9 o'clock. Eating after 9 is a normal occurrence for a lot of people. Eating before 8 is an abnormal occurrence. So the majority of people, I'm sure, are going to easily eat after 9 o'clock. It's not going to be difficult for somebody to do that. Does that mean that, oh, they're doing intermittent fasting? You see how they're trying to tie it to intermittent fasting? It doesn't indicate that the person is doing intermittent fasting after they eat, eating after 9. As a matter of fact, the possibility of type 2 diabetes incidence increasing continues to increase if the person eats as far as 10 p.m. Think about that. 9 a.m. all the way to 10 p.m. That person is not intermittent fasting. So the person who's intermittent, so if you were to eat after 9, but not past 10 or not around 10 p.m., then you have a better chance of not having type 2 diabetes. So what does that tell you? That it isn't about fasting. It's simply a correlation that's being made with people who eat after 9 a.m. That is it. Not an intermittent fasting study, not a randomized controlled trial. We're not looking at someone who eats earlier than 8 o'clock versus those who eat after 9. But the ones eating after 9 are doing intermittent fasting, and the ones eating before 8 are doing intermittent. We're not seeing any of that stuff. They're just making an assumption. The Daily Mail is just making an assumption based off of meal timing, because it's the cool thing to do now to make fun of intermittent fasting. Go the opposite direction so you could get the shock value and the clickbait from those who do intermittent fasting, because a large group of people started doing intermittent fasting. That's all it is. So, of course, I'm here to debunk all of these studies, or to give you the actual truth about what is being stated in these studies and what they actually mean. Because somebody will see a headline like, is the jig up for intermittent fasting? Type 2 diabetes incidence increase with intermittent, and they won't know that this is literally not an intermittent fasting study in any way, shape, or form. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. And of course, until the next one, guys, peace out.